Hello, everyone. It's time for another episode of Friday Night Spiritual Insights with Michael Mirdad. So, thank you for joining us. I'm going to talk today about trauma and healing in relationships because I have thoughts of each of these sort of coming to me, and so I'm going to blend them. Now, when I'm saying trauma and healing in relationships, I'm not referring to exclusively to partnerships, trauma in partnerships, healing in partnerships, trauma and healing in all relationships. Okay, so let's make sure we understand that. And I very much thank you for joining us today because, we're in this together, this world, we're creating shifts and growth, and there's teachers out there that'll talk about healing, but they might talk about trauma mostly. They might talk about issues and shadow work and negative patterns and just the stuff of the pain life, the pain mind, the pain body. And then there's people that specifically prefer going the opposite, talk about ascension and healing and freedom and oneness and wonderful things like that. It's important for us to understand that life is about both, not one or the other. It's about emptying our cup, refilling our cup, not once, but consistently. Which is most important? Neither is more important than the other, because if I say the first, that healing is most important, then really we then almost focus consistently, persistently on our issues. Not enough on the rebuilding a new life. And if we only do the other, the positives, because there's a lot of people that, don't talk about the negatives, don't talk about the past, just talk positive, positive, positive. Well, that doesn't work because you're building on quicksand. I remember I used to use an analogy a lot back in the 90s that's still valid today. And that is, I would say people would start talking about, like they would say, Michael, can you do a workshop on the positive new life that we want to create? And so I would say, this is like saying, I'm building a house and I'm going to start with the trim, the trim up on the eaves and, outside here and there, and ornamentation. I said, it's like doing that when you don't even have a house built under it yet. So you have to have a house built under that trim. So the house, though, if built on quicksand, is worthless. You need a foundation. So I always call healing is the foundation. And it is. That's what's beneath us. It's our foundation. And then the house is a bit more like what I would call your relationships. If you have good health, healing of the past, foundation, relationships then are what we work on and get that together. It's not really one and then another and then another. It's not like 10 years of this to, and you graduate and get a certificate. They're always all happening at the same time, but there's an emphasis of one a little bit more clearly more than another. And it's foundational work. Got to have it. People that try to override that, they're just asking for trouble. It's called spiritual bypassing. You try to be all bliss bunnies, and you don't need to work on that old stuff that's in the past, and it's just a matter of time before those types of people are either going to get frustrated because their life isn't getting better at some point. They're going to think they failed, or that the whole thing is bogus. This whole spiritual path thing is bogus because they focused so much on spirituality, not on healing, and don't know why things aren't coming together for them. They're either going to do that, kind of give up, or they're going to end up having to have a session with me or people like me, because they're people that try to just circumvent, move on, go over here to this new life and positivity, and I know that there are some very popular teachers and teachings that say, ignore the past, it doesn't exist, just move on and only talk positive. They even say things like, what you're thinking about, focusing your mind on is what you want to create. So don't think about the past, focus on the future. See, that's really seemingly advanced. Those teachings, incidentally, have reached millions of people all of which are sadly mistaken. So it's me against them. In a ratio, it sounds really silly that Michael, one person, is going to say that the millions are doing something that's silly, off. But it's true. It is off. And let me explain. What they're doing has some merit. So that's nice. I like to be positive in that sense and bridge and give some credit where credit's due. However, what they're also doing is saying, focus on the positive because that's what you'll see. However, what you're not realizing, and those folks are not realizing, is that even when you focus your conscious mind on positives, you're not aware that unconsciously and subconsciously you're aware of wounds and hurts. So you can say, I am consciously, in parentheses or brackets, I'm consciously only thinking of positives because that's what teachers are saying you should do. And then they go, well, why are things falling apart? I only focus on positives. Because subconsciously, you still have unhealed wounds, the quicksand instead of good foundation. It seems really simple to me. Things tend to seem so simple that it's kind of an interesting aside I'll share with you. Some people say, Michael, you speak when you're teaching, you speak with such conviction, like you have such certainty about what you're saying. Well, obviously, like I can't imagine sitting here and doing guesswork. Why would I charge? How could I charge people for a workshop if I say none of this might be true? It's possible that none of this is true, but let's just try it anyway. It doesn't make any sense. I would only speak what I know to be true, and that's what great masters in the past have also said, that they're speaking from a place of knowing, not guessing, and that just makes sense to me. So I'm not trying to diss anyone else, but let me add to it. Yes, it's great to think positive things, but you cannot claim that that's the whole reality. That's not the whole reality building structure. That's not the whole reality matrix. You have a conscious and an unconscious self. Conscious and subconscious, if you want to call it that. And the subconscious is like basically the concept of that iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is what you're consciously thinking of. So it's just a little bit of daily chatter. Subconscious is like the middle of an iceberg, so much more than the tip. So much more going on in the subconscious. It's like experts say that if you were susceptible to hypnosis and they could put you under, what they could do is say this, okay, consciously, let's have you walk into the mall and then come out and tell us what you saw consciously. You go, well, I saw, there were medium number of people and there was some music, I think, in the background, and I could smell some of the food in the food court, and saw some people carrying packages. Is that it? Yeah, that sounds about right. If they put you under hypnosis, they're going to say, wow, what did you see? And it's going to be like several times more information, multiples of times more information. You're going to go, well, and then I overheard this conversation. Then I saw this. Then I noticed somebody's shoes when they were walking by. But they didn't even walk in front of you. And you were able to sense it, feel it. It's amazing. So there's so much more going on. And someone's going to say, if you just think positive thoughts, you're going to be all good. No, man, that's why you don't just think positive thoughts for a few hours or days and everything just turns around and you're blissful forever. Why is it that there's still this heavy stuff? Because unconsciously there's so much. Now, what's amazing, and it's even a great part of the story here, is that beyond the subconscious middle section of the pyramid, or the iceberg, is the superconscious that knows even more. You could say the conscious mind is like, turn it this way, the root chakra, the tip of the iceberg. The root chakra means your conscious self, your conscious physical self. Go deeper still into the subconscious. It's the astral chakra, the navel center and so on. And that's where you're psychically able to pick up. That's what psychics pick up on, is astral stuff, subconscious stuff. They can read, they can feel with their own subconscious, picking up stuff. So that's pretty cool. And that sounds like, wow, that's the highest that there is probably. No, there's also superconscious, which is actually going higher and higher up and more like the heart center. So the superconscious is not really God centers up here. The superconscious self is really, you could say, much more akin to the heart center. And in that place, which very few people, everybody's connected to all of them. I mean, you're here, you know, you're awake, you're alive, you're a being. So you have all this going on. But most people are only aware of their conscious self. Then there's the subconscious, fewer people, so few that we pay them because they're psychics. They're people working on the subconscious, hypnotherapists and people doing EMDR and different kinds of work. You know, it's deeper subconscious stuff, which is great. And when they construct new healing techniques related to subconscious stuff, they're phenomenal. People go, God, I did this tapping technique or this EMDR or this hypnotherapy, and it did worlds of difference in my healing. Of course, because you're tapping deeper into a person. The subconscious stuff, which is actually more of a cause than an effect. Your subconscious stuff has more of an influence in your life than your conscious stuff. And yet, most of the world, most of the people on planet Earth think and live only consciously. And in a way, it makes sense. It's much safer for me to have a conversation with you. Let's do this and say, I said to you, I'm going to meet you at 5 o'clock p.m. and we'll get something to eat. Now, I show up at 7. You're no longer there. You call me later and say, well, what the heck happened? You know, you didn't show up at 5 like you said. No, I said 7. No, 5. No, I said 7. And you go, you know what, Michael? I'm gonna order the video in the store where we were when we had that conversation, you know, and you play it back to me. And there I say, we'll meet at 5. And then I say, okay, but wait. A psychic could tune in and confirm that subconsciously I was thinking, I probably should say 7. That doesn't mean that I said 7. So just because I unconsciously said something doesn't validate anything, right? So that would be a very frustrating world. So there's some merit to us being grounded and kind of let's have conversations that we can hear, you know, instead of ones that are kind of floating around. Especially since when I thought 7, I might have thought, or maybe 4. The subconscious goes all these different places. It's not ultimately supposed to, you know, when you think from a healed person, but the manic mind does that a lot more than the healed mind. So we have the conscious self, we have the subconscious self, and then we've got the superconscious. And the superconscious is more like the soul. And that's where you would hear, read, know the Akashic records of a person. So Edgar Cayce was not an astral psychic reader. He was not merely a clairvoyant. He had all those kinds of skills as an aside, but no, like someone like Edgar Cayce, he was reading the Akashic records, and that is the heart and soul. So he was reading a soul record of a person. Now, there's a lot of people out there, psychic fairs, when they heard about this, you know, and they gradually learn about different psychic skills and they learn to be tarot readers and psychometrists and so on, it's inevitable that they'll catch on and go, wow, this whole psychic, like Edgar Cayce, Akashic record, that sounds like, because that's the most accurate reading you can give. So they all start putting it, you know, on their little table cards, their signs, you know, Akashic record readings, and it starts to become kind of flippant. You know, a new ism, a new thing to advertise that you do, when in fact you might have very little ability to actually read the Akashic records. You know, so someone could say to me, Michael, can you do a workshop on Akashic record reading? There are certain workshops that I cannot give, will not give, and that would be one of them. Because I can teach people about it and teach people how to access such things. But my conscience won't allow me to take money from a person if I don't think it's actually going to help. For example, let's say I do a class and let's say that there's 100 people. What if 5 of them just aren't able, because it's not a head thing that you memorize. It's a heart thing that you have to expand to be able to do that. So what if 5 people, for whatever reasons, unhealed wounds, closed-minded, whatever, 5 people say we can't. Just let's say 5. they can't do it. I don't feel good about that. I don't want to teach something that I can't know. You're likely, at least 99 out of 100 are going to be able to get it. And that's why when people say, Michael, can you teach your ability intuitive healing? No. I can teach a lot of deep healing processes. I do. I've done it for many, many years, and it's great. But to a degree, I've said to people, to heal, you have to love. And I cannot promise you that you'll be more loving when we're done with the workshop. So I can't have how to love level 1, level 2, level 3. I can't. It doesn't work in my mind that way. I can't imagine charging for a heart-centered thing if I can't for sure guarantee that shift for a person. That doesn't mean I'm playing down my abilities. I'm going to teach them. They're going to learn great things. It's not that I doubt my skill to teach. It's that my conscience isn't going to be okay. First of all, putting level 1 on love, it doesn't make sense to me. But also, just knowing that some people can really get their heart invested in wanting to be able to do that, doing the workshop and being one of a few percent that doesn't pull it off. It's really, it can really hurt a person's feelings. So I'm more tactful about those kinds of things and teach. My approach is a different form of teaching, not guaranteeing. I've seen even spiritual teachers out there in the world, they're authors or whatever they are, teaching and certifying, like guaranteeing people enlightenment in, one weekend, and words like that, enlightenment or whatever. And it's like, wow, I couldn't do that. I can't guarantee that. Because when I have students, I can bring them in at a very deep level, and I've done so over years. And there's a point where I realize you can only take people so far, and then each level, each step of the ladder that you take people as a teacher to students or clients or whatever they are, they have to be willing to navigate that next step. And when I see that they're not going to do it, that's really hard, because they're friends, they're students, you've been with them a while, and you see, it could be a topic of money, it could be a topic of wounds they don't want to look at, it could be they can't be honest enough or consistent or something. And I can see when it's happening, and it's really a drag, because as a teacher, it's like being a parent when you know your children, their minds, sometimes they're starting to stray. Sometimes they're starting to think yucky thoughts or, hurtful thoughts, or they're starting to hurt from dating and they don't want to talk about it. You can see someone you're caring about starting to kind of descend, and as a parent, teacher, whatever role we play, you could be a physician and seeing your client starting to health descending, and you want them to do more, but they won't. And so it's kind of a challenging thing. So keep that in mind as healers, as readers, as whatever you do. It's not always easy to give advice that they're not going to follow, or that you've reached a limit of where they're going to be able to go with you. And, and then sometimes that's a challenging ending. It's not usually graceful and responsible. So continuing, we have this idea that people say, okay, first of all, let me complete a little bit on the trauma stuff. So people say, okay, I feel like I've talked about that. Talking about doesn't mean it's gone. And there's not a solid answer on how do I know when a topic is healed. My advice has always been, just remain open. Well, I don't want to remain open. I want it to be done. Well, no. That means if you want it to be done, you're really saying you need it to be done. Meaning you don't like it and you need it to be done, which means it still has some power over you. That's not a great sign. It's not a bad sign, but it's not a sign of I'm done. It's a sign of there's still a charge. So how do you know when you're done? How do you know when something feels complete? What I can tell you is stay open. And open means this. Yeah, I feel like I've done some good healing work on that. Are you done? Is it past? I feel complete, but I'm open. That's how casual it should be. So that when you say, I'm completely done, your ego's like, we know how to throw this person off. All it has to do is throw one little crumb of of old wounds, and you're going to be like, wow. And it'll find a way. I mean, my God, it'll find a person to enter your life that looks like somebody that triggers you. Or it'll be in a dream. When you're really good at blocking the outside world, it'll leak in as a dream, and you'll dream of some, creepy event or person or whatever it happens to be. And then you're going to get a little triggered. It's just a dream, and you'll try to stuff it. Those are all signs of old stuff coming up. And, whatever it happens to be, it's going to be. And, it's better to just go, oh, wow, okay. Like, for example, I just mentioned to somebody, I think maybe it was in a talk or whatever, I just mentioned this week that we're doing this workshop with Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, and myself. So he and I are doing this great workshop. It'll be an online or in person. If you're in Sedona, you can attend in person, or you can attend online. But we're going to make an experiential version of The Shack, the book he wrote, because The Shack is like a place where you collapse into healing old stuff. It's like this place where things are hidden. So I'll come back to that in a moment. But when I saw the movie, just long story short, I didn't know it was the movie. I flipped on the TV and I saw a few minutes of something, and I was only catching a few minutes, but I was like, this is deep. Like, what is this? Not knowing what it was. And when I say deep, I mean it was spiritually, powerfully deep. Deep also because there's depths of different kinds. There's emotional depth, psychological depth, spiritual depth, on and on. So I could feel that whatever this is, I'm like, wow, spiritual depth, but there was also emotional depth. So all of a sudden I'm watching and I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. And then all of a sudden I'm like, uh-oh. And it started navigating topic of a trauma in this guy's life. And this was a pretty significant, substantial thing that happened. And I was just like, wow. But my point, moral of the story is, I found myself wanting to turn the channel. Why? I'm healed. That's what you do, guys. That's what you have to do is go, wow, that's cool. No, it's not fun, but wow, that's cool. I was wanting to turn the channel. As soon as I saw that I was wanting to turn it, it must be rubbing up against something. That's all. Am I good? Am I bad? Forget all that. Who cares? It's rubbing up against something. It could be the last of your wounds, but if you obsess on it, you just added 10 more. Why would you want to do that? So you can be a spiritual teacher. I mean, Yogananda still had stuff going on in his life. He was broken at the rejection and betrayal of some of his friends who started turning on him when they heard some gossip, and they started buying into the gossip and passing the gossip. And he was heartbroken that these people could act so ridiculous when they knew his heart. They should have known his heart. But that's their trip. That's because they ran into their stuff, projected it onto him, used it as a reason to leave. So stuff happens. Every apostle had stuff going on, and they're with Jesus. I mean, firsthand. It's okay. You have to keep things light. And that isn't right in the context of today. Healing, trauma, healing, relationships. Keep things light. Don't make anything so horrible that you're not willing to look at it. Don't make anything so shameful or horrible that you can't talk about it appropriately, that is, to the people you can trust or counselors or whatever it happens to be. So, summarizing the first part, trauma. Long story short, being on earth is traumatic. It's traumatic being born. It's traumatic, believe it or not, when you're in the womb, you pick up your the emotions of your mother and the attitudes of your father. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think mine went very well. My mother wanted an abortion for me, so I'm sure I must have picked that up somewhere along, you could just picture being in the womb going, excuse me? I'd like to vote on this. So, it's like you guys shouldn't have fooled around. You fooled around now, come on. So I'm not saying that don't have abortions. I'm saying to them, I'm picking up the emotion. So it's like a kid's going to pick that up, the attitudes of the father, being mad at her for getting pregnant, all those kinds of things that a lot of our parents felt. So you're picking up stuff before you're even born. You're coming in with stuff before you're even born, but then stuff while you're in the womb. Then first, when you're finally born, it could be like the oh, got to feed the kid, it's crying, or change the diaper. You're putting everybody out, like, geez, man, I didn't mean to inconvenience everybody, might be what you're feeling. So this is traumatic to be here. It's traumatic for them to poke your skin and try to get blood out to do their blood tests. All these things, even things that aren't meant to be traumatic. I remember my first child, she was probably, I guess she was less than one. And I brought her to Sedona because I was looking to move to Sedona back then in the early 80s, around 82 or whatever year it was. And I thought about, maybe, this sounds like a great place. And it wasn't meant to be yet then. Instead, I went to a better place at the time, for the time, which was the Northwest, green and beauty and all that. But I ended up in Sedona now. So I brought my daughter, and I went to see this guy because he was into Edgar Cayce, and he was all, New Age and holistic and all that. So I went to talk to him just to see if I would work with him. If I did move here, I would be working with him. He was a good guy, had a really lot of depth and all that. But he saw my daughter, and he said, could I adjust her, And so he kind of gave her back a little pop. And the bones are not solid yet in a child, but you can still move. They're still pliable. You can move them, and they're out of line sometimes. And then he takes her head and goes, a little crack, crack. And I remember she, a little startled. Then all of a sudden, the little loop came out, and she started crying. Oh, it broke my heart. It was like, because she didn't cry a lot as a kid. None of my kids did. And the lip came out, and she started crying, and it was like I participated in something that hurt her, So my point is, even when we're not meaning to hurt others, they can feel traumatized. So stuff happens on this planet. It's a dense planet. My God, it's dense. Gravity, glands are shutting down, chakras are just shrieking, and the aura tries to constrict to protect us because somebody walks in the room and we can sense that there's something off with them. There's, whatever else, guys, addictions, and there's all kinds of stuff. My point is that not to overly empower trauma, but to say it's everywhere. It's everything is traumatic. I mean, you could have a moment where you, oh God, worked all day, can't wait. I'm going to go home and have, one of my favorite things, man, I throw a bunch of chocolate chip cookies in a cup and pour ice cold milk on them and let it mush up and then start eating like cereal, I guess what you people would call soup, but it tastes much better than probably any soup you folks eat. So anyway, I'm munching on these, maybe I would walk in and go, God, I can't wait. After a long, hard day of work and do all what I do and travel, I get in and open the bag and there's like one cookie. Those kinds of things can even seem traumatic because there's a moment of, constriction. And it's something let me down, or something did this, or, I didn't get the raise I wanted at work, or, whatever, expectations. So it's not only things that overtly happen, even things that aren't meant to have caused, and they accidentally bring about some sort of trauma. And I know a lot of people that say, oh, I don't have any trauma and my life's great and I'm always happy. And that's possible to be happy most of the time. It is, obviously. Some people have a good consciousness to do that. Other people, it's because they have good karma, so they create good things. Others, they just adapt really well and keep pretty positive. So it can happen. But I don't want those folks, I don't want you to think that those folks literally have no issues. They might even be in denial of them because there's so much living on that refilling positive side instead of looking at the other. Remember the caduceus, the symbol of healing. The caduceus has this winding up like this. Well, think of one half of the caduceus as healing and the other being spirituality. So you have to do your foundational work. And over here, the walls of the building are the relationships, which are half related to healing and half related to rebuilding. But the trim, the roof on the house, you don't put the roof on first. The roof on that and the trim, that's the next. That's what I call bliss. It's a term I used a lot more when I was teaching in the 90s about healing. I backed off from teaching some of the intensive healing workshops that I did. I loved doing them. I did them once a year, like I do Mastery and Christ Consciousness. But when I came to Sedona, teaching healing, just like I was teaching sacred sexuality, teaching healing and sacred sexuality, both became workshops I backed off on. First, because I had done them enough and a lot, you know, but really I would still be doing them if it weren't for the experiences I had in Sedona, where people that lived here were often very fragile psychically, and so doing some of the deep healing work, it was just the nervous systems were too vulnerable, so they couldn't do quite the deep exercises I once did with people that I knew better, and that, you know, kind of bring them in and work them at a deeper level. It was just a little too much, and I could see that in a couple of people, and so I thought, you know, done. And I'd stopped that, I think, before I even stopped the sacred sexuality. I stopped that within like the first year of being here, and then the sacred sexuality almost immediately after that. So my point is that even healing trauma can be so visceral, so woven into your nervous system, that if you can't really get what we have to do, I mean, it takes absolute trust for us to go there, then I don't want to mess with it. You know, I need to know that there's an absolute trust. And coming to Sedona, that was a little odd because I was new here. And so some people hadn't developed the trust, but they insisted, and I mean insisted, on participating in the healing workshop. And I was like, really, I don't feel it's right for you. But I remember in particular there was a male and a female that really insisted on it, and you know, I gave in, and I really shouldn't have. And it's not like I gave in because they paid. In fact, I think the two of them had financial issues and couldn't pay, or couldn't pay much. So it wasn't that at all. It was, you know, they just really pushed and pushed for it, and you know, and I said fine, and said, because I wanted to trust them that, you know, they were ready, because they said, please trust us. And I tried, and it didn't work out. I didn't like what I saw going on. So trauma has a really visceral effect on us, but two things have to happen. One, we have to step into our willingness to heal. If you're afraid of it, ashamed of it, it's not going to happen. You have to be willing to say, I remember one client from the, mid-90s who said, I'll do whatever it takes. And I've never forgotten that. God, I just love that. Oh my God. It's all, see, what happens is, it's not like I want control. It's that makes it so, because that's what it takes. You know, like in A Course in Miracles, you hear, leave no rock left unturned. It's whatever it takes. But that means you're trusting. And trust is what it takes to actually heal. Trust is one part of what it takes to heal. You know, so it's just, it was so beautiful to hear that. And that person made quantum leaps in healing because that was their attitude. As opposed to, I don't know, let me think, I'm going to watch every move and I'll have to scrutinize every thought going on here. It just slows it all and bogs it all down. But when somebody does that, it's because they're traumatized. So there's not anything wrong with them. They're not bad, or nothing wrong with you. You're not bad if you're the one that says, I can't really let go. That's okay. Just know that there's a reason, and you shouldn't be judged or hated for that reason. But it doesn't mean you would be a good candidate for this type of therapy or that type of counseling or that type of workshop and so on. So trauma, watch other videos that I've done. You know, there's a zillion of them for free on YouTube. There's videos I've done on healing, DVD sets that you can purchase. I think they're like $20 for 4 different lectures. Regret, shame, guilt, you know, all kinds of things about trauma. But watch them, don't watch them to commiserate, but watch them to learn so that you can step further out of it. Again, trauma. There's the implied, there's the what's done, what seemed to have been done, all these things, and they register somewhere. Now, I said there's a couple things to do. One is step in and participate in your healing. 2, ask God, the Divine Mother, the Holy Spirit of God, to help you with your healing process. Just imagine not talking to a counselor all the time, which you can do, sponsors all the time, which you can do. Also talk The second half of your healing, spiritual healing. Call on the Holy Spirit. Talk to her. Holy Spirit, right now I feel like such low self-worth and I'm not sure where it's coming from. So I want to give this to you and have it replaced with something new. And even if you just close your eyes and watch and breathe, it helps if you participate and breathe. You might notice nothing but 1 ounce of a shift. Let that ounce be something you give thanks for, and then more will come. So step into the spiritual healing that we all need. It helps speed up the human healing part that we're working on. Okay? Now that's the trauma, and it segues a bit more into healing. Healing, as I've already said, takes trust. Trust in your therapist, your counselors, trust in yourself, trust in God. It just takes trust. And you have an attitude of, well, I don't trust, so I'm not going to. Or you can say, whatever it takes. And I like that. Whatever it takes. So the healing of stuff is half, you could say, generally speaking, half done by you and half done by God. You can't actually heal completely if you only do it yourself. It's kind of funny and ironic, but trauma is related to our distrust of God, self, and others. So learning to trust again means learning to trust not just self, others, some counselors, some this or that or the other, self for sure, but also God. It's all hand in hand. Now, somebody says, well, forget it, man. I'm not going into that God stuff. Shh, I say to clients. Then let's just talk about developing more trust in me, more trust in your sponsor, more trust in you, or something simpler. Inevitably, I'm telling you, ultimate, perfect, holistic healing cannot happen without God. There's people that are holistic healers who never bring God at all into their work. Makes no sense to me. I understand that they don't need to be preachy about it, but it's not very holistic if it's not whole. And how do you call it holistic if it doesn't have the ultimate symbol of wholeness, oneness, God? So there's so many things on this planet that are bizarre. So that's just another one I threw out there. But okay, trust in something, and then just know it'll grow. It'll take time, perhaps for some more time than others, but it'll grow. So trauma into healing, and healing into all categories of my life, including relationships. The reason I'm saying this is trauma and healing in relationships is because you will reflect all of your traumas from the past, including your healing of the present or past or future, whatever, is also going to be reflected. All of you, all parts of you, trauma and healing are going to be reflected in your relationships. Now, there's slight exceptions to this rule because we have this uncanny ability to cover up things, but generally speaking, it's in my relations that I see healing. I've shared this before, but just very briefly. As a spiritual teacher, and I've done a lot of personal work and, and all that, and so I do healing, and I know how to check in and track, and, I know how to heal. I know how to be honest about stuff and work on stuff and all that. I feel pretty good about that. But at the same time, there's deepening levels and layers. But one thing, and I shared this before, but one thing I do is when I speak on a camera, it's not an inanimate object as much as you might think. This is thousands of people. And some of them I don't even know. And some of them wouldn't even like me because, we hear people bitching about my hair's too long. I wear an earring sometimes, or the way I dress, and that, I'm too new agey or freaky. They don't dig me. So, and yet I'm going to sit here and tell my deepest wounds, or in front of a church audience or a conference audience. That for me, I'm not boasting because it was a little bizarre and intimidating, but I'm here. How could I not do it? It's like it's just happening in the moment. So to be able to say, for you to say, well, I could never share some of my things with even a single person. When you work it, you'll move beyond sharing it, being honest with yourself, journaling, for example, nice quiet recesses of your own home, your journal. And then you might talk it with a friend, and you might talk it with a sponsor, and coming out a bit more counselor and a bit more. Then next thing you know, you might go into a group, a self-help group, a trauma group of some kind, a 12-step group of some kind. Next thing you know, you might be talking to 5, 10, 15, 20 people about your stuff, and they're hearing you as unconditional as they can, and loving as they can, supportive as they can. Pretty cool. Good job. You came out more. See, but that's going to be required. I don't want to pressure you, but I'm just letting you know. For me, it went from one to more, and then, to how many hundreds or whatever in an audience. And it wasn't always easy, but what helped make it easy was I realized, wow, the first time, choke up because I'd never shared this with this many people. And they're looking back at me. And as I'm talking and sharing something in my life, they're tearing up and blowing their noses. And that hits even harder because you realize, oh my God, it's the emotion that's waving back on you. It increases it. It really does. And it's like, wow. But it's all healing to another level. So it's almost like fine-tuning. And so I just feel clearer, and so on. So my sharing it openly helps my healing to another level. But what are you doing in your life to kind of help that along? And I'm not saying, again, it's not about commiserating and saying, okay, Michael said I must find 100 people to blurt this out to. No, it's not supposed to be something that's thought intellectually, like calculated. Just see where you can come out in a natural, organic way. A 12-step group or a crisis, trauma, maybe online. There's groups. And just try out a little something. And it may just be in line with me, like now. You guys might be typing, yes, this happened for me. And it's like, wow. And, like with me, if there's 1,000 people watching, there's going to be only 100 or 2 commenting. And when the 100 comments, there might be 99 that say, oh my God, sorry that happened. And there might be one that's like a jerk, get over it. Or they might say, I have worse stuff than you, or whatever it is. And you're going to be like, oh, you're going to be tempted. Don't make that one into the 99. It's one. And that one is a fragment of your own beliefs that you're unworthy of being able to share this stuff. We just mirror stuff back to ourselves, including those skeptics and doubters out there, naysayers, and even the trolls, that troll around on the internet and try to throw people off. Just, report them, block them, let us know if you see stuff like that. If they're really insensitive, and if they're a part of the group and they're insensitive, we might, let them know, hey, watch out, just kind of be careful. But if it continues, we'll block them. We'll just say sorry, because I want to keep a safe space for people that they can come out. If somebody wants to be part of an unsafe space because they're trolling or being rude, they should just go find some really dark void to hang out in and be part of the misery if they want. But that's not really what they're wanting to do. They're wanting to try to ruin for other people, and I'm not going to participate in that. Okay? So as I'm going to get to the last part here, you reflect everything in your relationships, your parental stuff, your past life stuff, your childhood stuff, your whatever, partner stuff. Things get reflected in our relationships. And it's kind of interesting to me because it's like you have 5 fingers for a reason, just like you have 5 limbs counting your head. 5 fingers for a reason. This represents earth, water, fire, air, and ether. This represents your physical chakra, emotional, intellectual, your intuitive, your heart center, counting upwards. And then the thumb represents your upper 3 centers. And when you think about, this is an example of trauma and healing in relationships, I so often find people saying, having a conversation about relationships going, Michael, guess what? I was with a husband or a wife or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner, whatever it is, who was really, really high energy, like aggressive. And you remember that? Yeah, I remember you telling me, well, yeah, I ended that. And I got somebody who's so safe and grounded now. And I already know what this means. Fire, the guy that they didn't like, too much fire, intensity. So they went and found an earthy guy. Now, not only is this earth, water, fire, and air, it's also male chakra, female chakra, male chakra, female chakra. Men are generally more earthy and fiery. Dense, grounded, and fiery. Female generally, and we all have all of them in us. The female is generally emotional and intuitive. People say, Michael, how come so many women are in the spiritual community studying spirituality? Why so many? Because getting into higher learning, spirituality, it's a heart chakra, it's a female chakra. Why are males teaching it? Because that's the tradition. That's that's just coming from old school. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. Don't obsess on that stuff. But there's a lot of males, but there's a lot of females in there too now. It's probably even close to even, but it depends on who you're calling teachers, because not all teachers are actually teachers. Some are just authors, but it's evening out quite a bit. But why so many female students? Because they have an open mind. And because they're intuitive, they have heart more. I'm not dissing males, because these gals that are so open-hearted, and again, it's not sexist, because this is the female chakra in us. Even a male who's open to going and studying is accessing his heart chakra. I'm just saying that generally speaking, the archetype is male, female, male, female. So men are often earthy and fiery, more intense. Females, emotional. This shouldn't be like something new to anybody. We hear this all the time from people, and women are also intuitive. So why so many women in the spiritual studies? Because their hearts are open, and that's a really great thing. Any teacher should be really grateful to see that that's what's happening. But wasn't it true that 100 years ago, 50 years ago, it was so far more like, even in the 70s, predominantly males were attending classes and so forth. True. Why? Because the topics were more intellectual spirituality, not intuitive spirituality, intellectual spirituality. So more males were attending because it was more masculine material. So that's kind of how this works. Now, my point though was, a gal says to me, oh, I got rid of the fiery guy. Now I got an earthy guy. Here's what's going to happen. I got rid of the fiery guy. Now I have a safe guy. And then 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, they're going to be like, oh, Michael, I'm so bored. I don't know what to do. I got this guy. He's real safe, but there's not as much passion. And he's not that much into spirituality. You wanted safe, grounded, seemingly stable, and that's what you got. And then there's people that'll say, I've had too much of that really dense guy. Now I'm taking the pendulum on this route, can be not only safe and practical, but can be very dense, heavy energy. So a person can say, I'm with somebody who's got that, and I want out of that. Then they go, I found someone who's very heart-centered, which is feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. I found someone, I really like this guy. He's so, and they don't know how to put it, he's so nice. Not the grounded kind of nice that a positive earth would be, but he's so nice. But what'll happen is there's going to be a time where they realize, I got a heart-centered guy who doesn't usually have a job. He has a 2-inch ponytail and goes to men's groups, and he's in touch with himself and all that, but he doesn't show up on time, and there's that. Males or females that are excessively airy have their downside. Males or females excessively fiery, even females that are fiery, can have a downside. Or emotional excess, physical excess. They can be a drag. But what's funny is that people don't even know how they're navigating. There's no other category. This is us. It's not like this gets more complex. This is us. So you're always dealing within this map. So don't pretend that you're out on some other map. This is the map of the human. And so we're always navigating here. Don't pretend you can find some other thing. Some seventh finger down here somewhere over here. This is it, our humanness. And so somebody says, maybe a fiery person find somebody that feels like, oh my God, this woman is just right for me, or it could be a male for that matter, but let's use stereotypes for now just to keep it simple. This guy says I found, or it's a woman with fiery, once falls in love and not knowing that it's because they wanted someone who's softer, sensitive, emotional. So they get together with them, but then after so many months, years, whatever, they start going, God, you're just so emotional all the time. Why do you always take, things so seriously? Maybe because you said I hate you, because that's a fiery kind of comment. Yeah, but big deal. I say that to everybody. It's like, it's bizarre. You're navigating in here and you don't even know it. So try this out once in a while. Try out that why you drew a certain friend or partner or husband or wife, why you drew certain people. See, my take is I don't want to draw any type of person to me like this. I'm looking for being whole myself and then share that wholeness. If you're in the human condition, then you're going to be identifying with one of these. I would rather identify the master within all of these. That's my work. That's my consciousness. That's my style and intention. So that's the other way to do this. If you're unhealed, you can't, because you're going to be compelled. You're going to just be compelled to go one of these or another. It's just the human condition. So you can say, well, and it's not bad. Don't try to say, oh, okay, I'm done with this and I'm going to go to Michael's version. I want to start doing all of it. Start healing before you start refilling. So where are you? Are you mostly earth, water, fire, or air? Or maybe a combination. Generally, males are these two. Generally, females are these two. And that's why you hear people say viva la difference, because they say you cannot reconcile the two. Well, they can't. Those people that tell you that men are just completely different, Venus and Mars or whatever other archetypes or stereotypes or styles they use or metaphors, that men are just men, females are females, and the best you can do is know that they're different and try to kind of integrate that difference into your ability to try to talk to them. So men, you're going to have to do this to be able to communicate to them. Women, you're going to have to do that to be able to communicate. And that sounds like you have living with the enemy and you're supposed to just put the weapons down temporarily and sort it out. That's not how it's done successfully. It's better than nothing, I guess, but it's not how it's done reality-wise. So what we learn to do is, first of all, own where we're at. Then we start to realize, how did I end up really all earthy or watery, fiery, airy? How did I end up these? Okay, I can see where, man, fire, man, that's my family. Wow, intense male energy, or God, trauma and female and sensitivity and getting plowed over by the more intense, victims of the intense people. How did I end up in the earthy, level, or so dense, and I want to be intuitive and so on? Or how did I end up so airy, or and so on? But also then the next step is not only where am I, but what am I also attracting? Because there's a chance, remember, some people will tell you like attracts like, but actually opposites also attract. I know you don't hear that half of the sentence, but the actual sentence is like attracts like, and opposites also attract, which sounds like, well, then what that means is everything attracts. Well, the more extreme it is in terms of like attracts like, if it's extreme, it'll attract sometimes likes to itself, but also opposites, extremes often attract. So if I'm excessively hardened in my heart, I might attract a child into my life. I have a child that's really out there emotional, because it's there to try to help reel me in a bit, teach me to open my heart more and get in touch with emotions more. So I might be fiery. The duality is not always these two extremes out here, air and earth. I might be fiery, needing to bring in some emotion. I might be earthy, needing to bring some intuition and heart and love and forgiveness. I might be airy and forgiving, needing some groundedness. So see if you can detect, is there a pattern of what kinds of people you attract? That's one thing to check out for your own self-inventory. Not only a pattern, but look for the anomalies, the opposites, because we make choices that are sometimes basically mirroring exacts and other times opposites. The opposites are like compensatory. So it's kind of like, instead of I'm really earthy, you're really earthy, and we hit it off. That's really great. We're both earthy. That does happen. Like attracts like. But also opposites attract. So I need something to compensate for my lack of, the air, let's say. I'm so excessive earth, I need something to compensate. So watch not only for your regular patterns, but look for the anomalies where sometimes you've gone earthy person, earthy person, earthy person, air, or fire, 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 water, or something like that. Some movement from one to another that's 1 or 2 or 3 steps away from the one you were in. So just check it out and see, because that'll tell you a little bit about yourself. And it also will tell you about the relationship you're in now. And I swear it would be so great if you took time to say, I can see now how trauma and healing reflect in my relationships. Because when I was traumatized in my life, I drank a lot. Drinking attracted a lot more other people like me, wounded, into my life. Then I wanted to heal, and I swung way over into spirituality, ultra spirituality, hanging out with all kinds of spiritual people for a long time. Then you might realize when you did that, it lacked some groundedness. So the last piece to this puzzle that I'm getting to is, not only are you going to look for patterns, but also the anomalies, when you're compensating, those kinds of moments. Not only the example I gave of a man, but also a woman. This applies to all genders and all ages for that matter, especially in maturing years, past, when you're dating and all that. Your father might have been fiery. You might attract somebody who's fiery. Whether you're a male or female, you might attract somebody who's fiery. Of course, a boss for that matter, or friends that mirror your dad. But let's say your father was very fiery. Well, then you might attract a partner that's fiery. That means essentially they're going to mirror your father's stuff. You might not want to believe that, so you put it off for a while, but at some point you go, oh my God, I can't believe this. If you're using Michael's analogy here, fire. I got fire, man. That's intense. I got intensity. See, the hair color might not be the same, the height, the body shape, a lot of things, so you miss it. Try this. Wow, I got more fire. You also can say, because there's more to you than meets the eye, instead of just choosing fire, you might go, I refuse. I refuse to do fire. My dad was fiery. So you consciously or unconsciously go and get something that could be seemingly an opposite. Maybe they're going to be more emotional. Maybe they'll be more grounded. But that's just going to be compensatory. It's going to be a seeming opposite. But the opposites that are created out of compensation are never authentic. They're only temporary remedies. Kind of like saying, I'm so hot, man, it's hot out. It's really hot, or it's really cold. And then you splash yourself with the opposite temperature of water. Wow, that cooled me off, or that warmed me up. Wait a few minutes and see if it does the same thing an hour later, a few minutes later, 10 hours later, 10 days later. If it's still 110 degrees, you don't go splash and go, well, that covered me for a week. It's going to only last so long. So it'll all come around, and you'll realize, most people won't realize what's happened and why things are falling apart. Now, what I was leading to earlier, and I'm going to start coming to a close here, is that it really helps for us to say, I'm not a victim of the world I see. And then add other words like, I'm not a victim of the relationships I see. I'm not a victim of the finances I see. I'm not a victim of the romance. I'm not, whatever topic comes up. You know, I'm not a victim of all the categories of life. I'm not a victim of relationships, though. And so I can see where I didn't just get a guy who was more intellectual, because fire is also intellect. So you might attract from, let's say you're doing a lot of emotional stuff, and then you go and get a guy and you go more fire. Sometimes this chakra will be more an intellect, neurological firing. It's the fire is still there. It's intellectual nervous system. It's brain activity. So it can take a different form of fire and trick you. So you go, well, this person isn't fiery, like raging, but you might find them intellectual, and so it's a safer version of fire, but still it's fire. So kind of be, practice being able to know and discern where you are. Because becoming responsible, I'm not a victim of this, I'm responsible, I'm participating. So I drew some fire to me, some water to me, some emotion, some earth, and just start to see it, and it'll help you go, oh, I totally get it now. I totally get it. I can see why that made sense. I wanted grounding, or it could be something else. So I've known people to say, well, I was with an intellectual type of fiery guy or an airy type of guy. We'll use the guy in analogy right now. And then they go, let's say air. Got an airy kind of a guy. And then they say, I met another guy and it was totally different and I loved it. Oh my God, it was wonderful. Because it might have been fiery. But they also might say, I like an earthy guy, because an earthy man or woman could be sensual or sexual, because that's earthy. But sometimes sexuality is fire mixed with earth. Earth, root chakra, sex, but fire can intensify the sex. So let's say there's an air or water person that says, oh my God, I found a new partner and the sex is fantastic. But all they did was take air and water and go find some opposite. So now they're going, it went from, a bit of an emotional experience with sex or whatever, or very airy or whatever. It was very kind of out there, drifty. And then they go, and I got somebody who's more fiery. But with the fire intensity of the sex comes a person with rage when you're not having sex, or when you are for that matter. And then you go, I like the sexual root part, but I don't like the fire that comes with it. But take responsibility and say, I was trying to compensate and get some more masculine energy in my life. Somehow the other people I was with, even if it was a woman talking about a male, they might have been in some ways, even if they had their negative manipulatory kinds of energy at times, deep down they were wimps. Now I got somebody who seems strong. Well, how long is that going to feel okay to you? Because the strong can become overbearing. So I said the last category of all this is what you really want is not for someone to be something. Is you want them to be whole, and if you want them to be whole, you have to work on your own wholeness first. You have to learn to embrace all aspects, categories of yourself, and that includes your spiritual self. Become more whole. So what do I do if I'm in a relationship? I mean, Michael, thanks. This would have helped about 25 years ago, but what am I going to do now? I'm in a relationship and I'm here and they're there, or I'm here and they're there, or whatever. What do I do now? Well, it depends how intense the situation is. But if I feel like I'm emotional and heart-centered, and I've got some real majorly fiery person, and they want to fight and blurt and whatever every so often, I don't care if that fire also makes me feel good sexually. Heck with it. Something's off. I would consider ending it if it's really intense. So what if it's not intense? What if it's an intellectual type of person, or a very grounded, simple, kind of person? It could be that, the root sometimes. Then what do I do? You can talk to them as long as it's not intense and fiery and dangerous. Talk if they seem intelligent and if they seem grounded, or one or the other. Talk and say, honey, I really dig this, man, and you've been the safest person. If it's a grounded person, for example, you've been a safe person for me, or an airy person, you've been a safe person for me. It's great. Compliment them. And I feel, this is a positive and tactful way of saying it, and I feel so grateful and into you and into this relationship that I just, sometimes I want to feel more passion with this relationship. See, that's a tactful way of, instead of saying, you're not passionate enough, you say, this is so good, I would like more passion, if that were the thing missing. And they might say, you're right, I get it, let's do that. And they might say, if they're excessively here, first, if they're here, they might go, what? Because grounded could be very simple. What do you mean? More passionate. What do you mean by passionate? This one, the sometimes hyper-intellectual, would be like, why don't you go ahead and do that and just send me the cliff notes? Like, I'm not interested. I'm busy, and so on. And that can break the heart of the pursuer, but it's good to ask. And then you have to ask yourself, if they say no, if they say yes, it's great news. If they say no, you have to ask yourself, is everything really so cool, other than this, so together that I think I can handle that? Or it could be, I can't handle it, but we have children that are, a few years underage, and I'm going to wait till they grow up old enough and then make a change, maybe. Or it could be, like I said, that, we're missing a piece, but that's okay. I feel really okay about it, as long as you know yourself and that you can afford that. But you might also say, all right, I'm glad you told me. And I want to say something, honey. When we got together, very often, this is true, when we got together, you were already a really grounded, practical person. You were already very intelligent. You were already very artistic. You were already very sensitive. You were already, and I knew that. And it worked for the time. But I've changed some things about myself. I'm not accusing you of having changed. In fact, it often is us guys. So you can say, honey, it was really I changed. And I'm not shaming myself for changing, but I am saying that where I might have wanted, you don't have to take out the fingers and start pointing and, doing the technique and exercise like Michael gave you, but you can just say, I can see where I really love that about you, grounded and all that, but I can also see something in me that I'm wanting to come out more and experience some more zest and gusto and, zeal for life, and sometimes when I've advised this kind of thing in workshops or lectures, people go home and talk to partners, and some of them scratch their head and go, I have no idea what you're saying. Others will say, yeah, I've seen those changes, and you're right, I don't think it's going to work, but I love you, and they part amicably. And other times there's other variations of the response. I would say to you in general, it would be a lot. I would be exaggerating to say it goes well 2 out of 10 times. It's more likely 1, and I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm just telling you that given all the background we have with people, given the investment of time and energy, they don't always easily go, oh, you must be talking about that finger thing Michael was talking about. I totally get it. Let's end amicably. Let's just end at peace, and or nor will they say, hey, want to be holistic with me? It just isn't always going to happen that way. So, I'm sorry to have to deliver that news. And it's not something you need to obsess on and be afraid of. It's more like you could just say, wow, it's kind of a bummer that humans are like that, isn't it? That's the way I would say it. God, I would like this to be simple, man, but humans, they react, they defend, they offend, and so I'm just going to do my best to get my own side of the street cleaned up, as they say in 12 steps. But I'm just going to work this through in my mind, so that when I have these kinds of conversations, I don't get overly reactive in any way. Instead, I want to kind of come across like not like it's all premeditated and look then to make them defend. It's more like I want to just be informed. I want to be clear about what I'm saying, why I'm saying it. Like, so don't just hear me lecture about it. Really get in your mind your own interpretation, so that you feel comfortable and confident when you're having the conversation. It's kind of like saying, make an informed decision and not kind of rash, and certainly not, well, I heard this guy say this, so I'm going to blurt it out 10 minutes from now. Really try it on, zip it up, button it up, wear it, and make sure you feel like you understand it. And if you missed this point, this wasn't just advice about relationship. It was trauma and healing, because this thing that we're going to do by talking to people and saying, hey, would you like to join me in a higher level, more holistic level? Would you like to part ways? Or whatever you're going to plan on doing with all this. Part of this is about recognizing not do or die for them. It's I recognize where my wounds and or healing has infiltrated into my life. My wounds have caused me to need this to compensate for that. My healing has helped me become more balanced and more balanced and more balanced. So how are you doing? It's just another way of looking at yourself to see how you're doing in your healing process. Okay? Everything should start looking a bit more healthy, and it doesn't mean stuff doesn't come up. You know, you could be as tied together, integrated, healthy, whole, and all that, and still there'll be pieces. Stuff comes up on planet Earth, and you needn't toss it all out and get all upset. Just recognize it as soon as you can and learn to see, are people mirroring certain topics. I remember one time there was a period of about a year where it seemed like, especially females that I met, males too, but especially females, they were all a particular sign of the zodiac. I won't say which one it is. But it was kind of, I knew it, I could see it. Just like doing this, Earth, Water, Fire, Air. Instead, it was signs of the zodiac, because that also can apply. Except there's 12, so it becomes harder to see the patterns as easily as just 4. So I remember I met this one gal, and I think she needed a ride somewhere or something. And okay, you know, we just met, but okay, you need a ride. Let me give you a ride. We got in the car, and somehow, God only knows, because it wasn't like a spiritual workshop or something. It was just somebody that needed a ride. And however it was that the topic came up, guess what sign I am? I'm like, I bet it's this one. They're like, whoa, you are like intuitive. You're a psychic. And I'm like, no, I might be, but that's not how I knew this. It's like, because there was a stereotype, an archetype that was, you know, leaking into, spilling over into my life at the time, just like this. This is around 1990. And it was like, wow, I could see that archetype, you know, bleeding into my life. And it was like, wow. And so it was kind of cool and kind of informative to go, what does this mean? How can I integrate this myself? So it could be signs of the zodiac you're seeing. It could be other types of things I won't go into that you can see as a pattern. But this is a real simple one, and it's this close to you to be able to see it. You don't have to study a whole lot to figure it out. It's Earth, Water, Fire, Air, and just kind of remember that each of these has different aspects, extremes you might call it, of each of these. They're not all just one-dimensional. There's, you know, like I said, fire can be intense fire, or it can be intellectual fire. Those can look very different. An intellectual can seem very poised and, you know, soft-spoken in a sense, but centered. But it's still fire, but it's just taken a different direction. Okay? So, thank you so much for joining. I pray you're doing well in your life and that this can be applied in a way that can make a difference. If you apply it, it will make a difference. And please share some feedback. If you're in my, I remember I have a Friends of Michael Mirdad Facebook group, and in that group, you can join and participate. I think we flattened it out. We emptied the group at one time because I had thousands of people, a few thousand people in there, and I noticed that out of a few thousand, only so many actually participate. And it's part of that's because some people love just being in groups and go, I'm in like 20 Facebook groups. That's exactly the opposite of what I'm like. I'm like, you're not participating, goodbye. And so we took 3,000 and dropped them all. Every one of them, we just leveled it, you know. And then we started over. So we have like about 250 now. You know, and it's kind of cool, but you can join, and it's a group, but it's a private group. But you can join us, and there you can share a bit more. You can say, guys, I'm happy to be joining, and you know, this is new for me. Or you can say, I love this because I've been studying a long time. Whatever. Just be honest. We don't want preachy people in the group, and it isn't Michael only talking. It's everyone sharing feedback like they're actually friends with each other. But it's under the umbrella that it's Michael Mirdad. So I have guidelines and rules, which is no preaching, but it's also you know, positive and other things like that in the group. So join the group if you feel called. Blessings to you all. God bless you in heart, mind, body, soul. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.